Alright, fuck, here we go. Man, the 2010s. This decade went by fast. It was a lot for me, personally. It was my second ever decade, and my first full 0 through 9 at the end of a 20X. And most importantly, it's when I discovered and delved into my passion that I can honestly say will stay with me for the rest of my life. And if you can't tell what that passion is at this point, boy are you in for a surprise. No, it's not chemotherapy, it's video games. And as I want to make games for my career, or at the very least be a part of the industry in any way, shape, or form, I need to actually play some of them. And that's what I've been doing for the past 10 years. I've been playing, discussing, and learning about games, their design, history, owners, inspirations, creators, anything I was able to get my hands on through the internet or otherwise. It was all interesting to me. Naturally, I've been alive for around 469,246,031.476 micro fortnights, so I'm clearly an expert on all games ever made. Way more than people who actually play a lot more games or create them for a living. Definitely. So, I made my own little top 10 list for the games of the decade. This is a biased list. These games not only have intrinsic value to me, but I also chose to value their worth, importance to gaming as a whole, their impact on the genre, and of course, how fun they were. My big limitation, however, is that I'm not made of money and neither is my family. If I was able to afford every game out there, I would get every game out there. I've also never owned a PlayStation anything or an Xbox One, so I haven't been able to play every single game that was exclusive to them. With that little bit of information out of the way, here we go. First off, an honorable mention category to World of Warcraft, but it was released in 2004, Minecraft, but it was released in 2009, League of Legends, again, released in 2009, and Rocket League. Little Inferno also just barely didn't make the cut, because although it was delightful and distinctive, especially in its art style, it was a fairly clear cut under the rest in terms of impact on me, its genre, and the gaming industry. Now for the actual list, kind of. My number 10 is a bunch of games, actually. Telltale games, to be specific. The company may have bottomed up due to poor management, but that doesn't change the fact that the games they managed to produce during their time were all great, and pushed narrative episodic storytelling to its best. Walking Dead was their most popular adaptation and brought them more opportunity for creation with popular IPs, but it was only one of their vast library of great titles. Back to the Future the game, Minecraft Story Mode and its sequel, The Wolf Among Us, Batman, and even some Sam & Max games. These are all well written, well received, and fun. As for the actual gameplay, up until The Walking Dead, the games were 3D point-and-click adventure games. Walking Dead and what succeeded it still had the well-developed storytelling formula of the point-and-click style, but also built upon it, adding more gameplay elements like combat. Telltale may have died, but your enjoyment won't when playing their games. Number 9 for me is Counter-Strike Global Offensive. Some of you may look at that and go, but it's just Counter-Strike. But that's the point. Counter-Strike has such a refined formula that finally having a UI that's clear to anyone that plays the game made it so much more appealing and fun. I don't think I will ever spend as much time on a first-person shooter until I get virtual reality, because holy shit did I have fun with this game. The movement is satisfying, the guns are fairly balanced, and most importantly, digging around in custom maps is just plain fun. Valve transitioning this game to be free to play helped a bit in my opinion of it, but it's a good game nonetheless. One other reason that the game is on my list is that it helped grow the esports industry to a higher degree. Before CSGO, CS esports weren't too centralized. There was still the occasional major, but old CS was not as easy to observe as something like Quake, which is dead, or League, which also upgraded its visuals to be easier to observe. CSGO was able to centralize the competitive CS community through more advanced live balancing and helped grow it into one of the top viewed esports today. It's more fun to watch, more fun to play, and overall a damn good time. It's free. There's no excuse. Get it. Number 8 for me is Civilization 5. I know Civ 6 is out, and I've had a lot of fun with that too, but Civ 5 in my opinion is more important and more fun. Apart from being a great introduction to turn-based military strategy, Civ 5 evolved the Civilization formula through simple, well-received changes that emphasize the tactics of warfare over simply stacking units. This was done by changing the map tiles to a hexagonal pattern and disabling the ability to stack most military units. Sure, the game may not be very balanced, but there's nothing like sitting back for 6 hours with 4+ friends contemplating how you'll achieve world domination, all the while discussing whatever interests my fellow youth and I are currently following. Oh, and as a side note, I want to reiterate that Civ 6 is fun and more balanced, but Civ 5 is my personal favorite along with the other positives I mentioned. I would have put Civ 6 in this spot, but holy hell is it far less accessible, due to the card system and the way the map looks. Sorry, the map is technically more visually impressive, but it's just harder to see what was versus what is. Civ 5 just makes the areas dark that you can't see, while Civ 6 makes it a map. A real map. Also, the card system wasn't very accessible to look at. Sure, policies are better in concept, but I do not want to read 80 cards just to maybe change it later. And the policy system in 5 is also scuffed beyond belief, but it's complex enough for the aficionados, while also being visually legible enough for the newbies. If there's a mod out there to change it visually on my side, send that shit my way and I'll put Civ 6 in the spot. Alright, enough complaining. I know you'll go bananas for this next one. It made me go ape because it was fun as a barrel of monkeys. That's right, my number 7 is Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze. Holy crap, this game is amazing. When DKC Returns came out in 2010, it was the best 2D platformer I've ever played, because it finally felt like the genre matched artistically and mechanically to its potential. Retro Studios beat the shit out of Mario and then did it again better 4 years later. 2D platformers are so hard to get right because they're such an old genre, and when I say get right, I mean to make feel fun and fresh. Retro knocked it out twice in a row and brought back DK to the mainstream. Returns was more of a very nice adventure through many worlds, with more shorter levels, but Tropical Freeze does the opposite. There are fewer worlds and less levels in each. However, every goddamn level in this game is long and it feels like it tells its own little story, and its own little world. Pile this with beautiful visuals, great movement on Donkey Kong, actual challenging platforming, and great music by the legendary David Wise, and you have one of the best platforming adventures of all time. Only bad part about this game is the choice of Dixie, Diddy, and Cranky. Dixie is Diddy but better, and Cranky is annoying to use and situational. It's a no-brainer to pick Dixie every time. Number 6 is The Stanley Parable. This game just barely missed the top 5, as it doesn't do anything that mind-blowing for me, or in general. However, my enjoyment with this game are still beyond words, despite me talking about how amazing this game is. It redefined, or rather showed everyone, the potential of narrative storytelling in video games, and that because of the interactivity in this young medium, a lot of the tropes of, oh, you're this guy and your goal is X, doesn't really exist. Instead, you follow the narrator, and the narrative challenges the player directly and feels like more of an actual responsive experience. In my opinion, this will eventually be looked back on as a landmark game in terms of narrative storytelling in games. It's just simply due to how much it broke the mold and expanded people's perspectives. Number 5 needs a bit of background. Let me be very clear here. I do not enjoy most JRPGs, or RPGs for that matter. They've always been a mess to get into because writing is always bad, and a lot of the time they beat around the bush with extra content and meandering and backtracking. They never get to the point. Additionally, I don't like turn-based combat very much. Paper Mario miraculously made me enjoy it, but it's a really tedious thing. Even the 2 Pokemon games I only like because of nostalgia. I'm an impatient player, and unless there's clever writing to hold me over, or an actual engaging reason that the gameplay is here, it's boring to me. I've completed few RPGs for this reason. Fallout 3, 2 Paper Mario games, Persona 5 are all standout RPGs, but few in number. until Undertale came along. It, despite all its cliches due to the internet, is a good JRPG from beginning to end. It may not be the prettiest game, but it was that when I played it, it got to the motherfucking point and allowed me to play through and finish the story. This is a linear game, a very linear experience compared to most JRPGs, which increased its enjoyment for me and decreased its enjoyment for others. So, this game isn't for everyone. Sorry. Toby Fox's Little Earthbound fan game ended up being its own little delight. Also, I'm not the biggest fan of the music, but it absolutely deserves the praise it gets. It makes me excited for the later installments of his next project, Deltarune. I played through the first chapter, and it was really solid and built upon what Undertale had in charm and wit. So, number 5 was Undertale and a cool black girl in codename Kids Next Door. Well, my number 4 also includes a cool black girl. Broken Age is the kind of point-and-click game that only comes around once a decade. It has a beautiful art style that isn't iffy CGI or pixel art. It's got good animation, it's comedic, well written, especially in the first half. It has a unique story, has good puzzles. Except this, I hate this. What mastermind could have directed this masterpiece? Tim fucking Schafer, that's who. He's the founder of Double Fine Studios. And you know, he's also the guy behind a few little indie titles that you may have heard of. You know, these. Grim Fandango, Full Throttle, Psychonauts, and its upcoming sequel Headlander, Day of the Tentacle, and the fucking Secret of Monkey Island. This was his return to this kind of game since the Fandango days of '98, and his experience carries over effortlessly. I won't spoil the story, but to give you a general idea, it's about two stories that you swap between. Teenage girl from a baking town, and a teenage boy bored in a spaceship. Play it for yourself. But be warned, the voice acting is fucking incredible. Not only are the lines well acted, but there's actual actors doing the voices. Jack Black, Will Wheaton, Jennifer Hale, Pendleton Ward, and the late voice actor John Seiken as your fucking spoon. Give this game a go.
Is something wrong, Commander Shea? Please say something, Commander. Are you waiting for another spoon?
Is it really any surprise that this would be on my list? My number 3 is Breath of the Wild, and oh boy did this game surprise. Because of how much there is to this game, I won't mention gameplay, only just my perspective on the game as a whole. Breath of the Wild single-handedly shattered any expectations of open-world exploration that I had or that the industry had. It's an RPG that, instead of limiting you, removes all limits from you. Like, for real. You can run from one end of the map to the other with zero load screen. Nintendo truly took every advantage when it came to their hardware and moved the bar so fucking high when it comes to how AAA developers should handle this genre in the future. Overall, it's beautiful for the eyes, the ears, and your soul. Every time I picked the game up for a couple of minutes, I ended up putting it down after a few hours. It's that entrancing. I can't do this game justice in one little summary due to its scale, but if you own a Switch at all, this is a must-have. And if you don't own a Switch, this is solely enough to warrant buying one, or at least a Switch Lite. Since Super Meat Boy's official release in 2010, Ed McMillan was put on the map for his incredibly unique art style and fast-paced indie gameplay. So, seeing that his other project got an insane amount of praise, it needed a sequel, kind of. My number 2 is The Binding of Isaac Rebirth. It's the definitive release and faithful remaster that expands on its strengths in every way, and shows every indie developer that you don't need to pour millions of dollars into a game to get all the worth you can from it. The fast-paced bullet hell is a definitive entry in the history of video games because it's now the most widely known bullet hell. Enter the Gungeon is popular, sure, but one could argue that Rebirth truly defined the genre for a modern audience, taking from older games like Ikaruga and skyrocketing its potential. It has a story, it has items, so many items, and man, does it just feel good to start a run. Because every time you do, it's different. Not just that you get different items and there's different floor layouts, but Starting from scratch, the story is further defined as you play. This is probably the most personal game on this list, but it still can't be understated that this game is incredible and helped establish indie development as a valid and profitable art form in the industry of video games. Finally, we've reached the top of the list. My game of the decade is none other than Portal 2. Since the reveal of Portal for the Orange Box's release in October of 2007, the gaming industry was completely entranced by just the idea of using portals. Packing the game in with Half-Life 2 was certainly a plus for buyers, but it was easily the star of the whole package. The original game had humble origins of a team by the name of Nuclear Monkey Software. The team was eventually hired by Gabe Newell to directly have them make their working title, Narbacular Drop, for Valve in the Source engine, and thus Portal was born. The sequel is even more interesting. Returning writers Eric Wolpaw and Chet Falasek further developed the world and history of Aperture Science. There's more portaling, more mechanics, more puzzles, more charm, more humor, more everything. The single-player campaign is one that you can easily beat in a few hours, just like the original. But, be that as it may, your first time through will still challenge you. It's good to note the difference here between being stumped in a puzzle game versus being challenged by it. You're stumped when you can't figure out the puzzle due to lack of information or clarity. You're challenged when the puzzle gives you enough information and clarity. However, how you connect the information and take action upon it should have some modicum of barrier or restriction, to the point where a difficulty is established. The developers really made sure that every test room and puzzling environment gave you enough information to be able to solve it. It's challenging, but beatable. The voice acting is impeccable, with great performances by Stephen Merchant and the J.K. Simmons, and of course, more incredible work by Ellen McLean as Gladys. The original was integral to gaming history, in that it showed how the first-person shooter and genres as a whole within gaming could adapt and evolve just as well as any other medium. I mean, a first-person action puzzle game? Sure, it doesn't sound too absurd now. We have Portal, Portal 2, Cube, Cube 2, Antichamber, and so many more. But back in 2007, this was a true evolution, much in the same way Breath of the Wild recently wowed everyone in regards to open world games. Why Portal 2 is distinctly important is the same reason that Half-Life 2 is of similar importance to Half-Life. Half-Life pretty much defined how storytelling could enhance the first-person shooter gameplay and immersion, and vice versa, how the gameplay could enhance the story. Half-Life 2 added to that, creating a trio of enhancement, showing the level of impact a physics engine could have on both the storytelling and the gameplay. Portal showed how a genre can evolve, and Portal 2 displays how well development time, world building, and writing can enhance gameplay and atmosphere. This is something already known within the industry, but Portal 2 accomplished it so expertly that it feels like the first time it's ever happened correctly. Portal 2 truly is the game of the decade in my humble, inexperienced opinion. And, whether you disagree with me or not, it's truly been a joy for the entirety of the industry.
This was a triumph. I'm making a note here, huge success. It's hard to overstate my satisfaction.